Today, we're going to dive into a deeply personal story. But this isn't just a story about hardship, it's actually a powerful case study on strategic leadership. We're going to break down how you can turn quiet competence into real intentional influence, using a framework that could totally redefine how you think about being visible in your career.
All right, let's get into it. Every great journey on a chessboard starts with a single piece, right? Well, in this story, we're starting at the absolute beginning with someone who has immense potential but absolutely zero visibility.
So I want you to meet Nana. Her early life growing up in the Philippines was defined by poverty. And I mean, she was one of 14 kids, so survival was the name of the game every single day. This quote, it just hits you, doesn't it? It's not just about being poor, it's about the reality of her starting position. A long walk home was a better choice than an empty stomach. That was her world.
But here's the thing. We're not here to just talk about a difficult story. We're here to reframe it. Her struggle wasn't just some challenge she had to get through. It was literally the starting square on a chessboard. And this is where the real strategic lessons begin.
This brings us to the very first stage of this really powerful idea I call the pawn to queen visibility framework. It's all about the journey from being quietly good at your job to being a person of real influence. And it all starts right here. Nanai's early life is a perfect picture of this pawn stage. She was unbelievably hardworking, incredibly smart, always at the top of her class, but she just put her head down, did the work, and hoped her efforts alone would be enough for someone to notice. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because this slide shows a conflict so many of us face, right? So many amazing, high-performing people live by the pawn's belief. If I just do great work, I'll get noticed. But the strategic reality, especially in big organizations, is that competence without visibility hits a ceiling, and fast. Invisibility isn't a virtue, it's a liability. It can leave you stuck, no matter how talented you are.
So let's get to the turning point. Let's see how one single calculated decision can completely change the entire game. This is that moment a pawn decides, nope, I am not staying a pawn.
So after graduating near the very top of her high school class, Nene just hit a wall. Her family had zero money for college. But here's the pivot. Instead of just accepting it, she made a strategic move. She went to her cousin and made an offer. She would work as a domestic helper, not for a salary, but in exchange for the opportunity to go to college. Think about that. That one decision completely changed the entire course of her life.
And let's be really clear about this. This wasn't some act of desperation. It was a conscious strategic choice. She was trading her immediate labor for a much better position on the board in the future. She grabbed the controls of her own career, which is the absolute first, most essential step out of that pawn stage.
Okay, so what can we actually learn from her journey? Let's pull out a couple of powerful leadership principles that you can start applying right away to increase your own influence. All right, first up, the internal gain. This is so key. Nene didn't see herself as a domestic helper who was just studying on the side. No way. She saw herself as a student who was strategically funding her education through her work. How you frame your role, first to yourself and then to everybody else, that dictates your position. She wasn't defined by her job, she was defined by her ambition. And that brings us to the second insight, the external action. Even when she had practically nothing, Nene was a giver. She'd share her food or later in life donate money she could barely spare. What she was doing, probably without even realizing it, was building social capital. Real power doesn't always come from what you collect for yourself. It often comes from what you contribute to the system around you. Generosity became her way of building trust and a powerful network. Okay, so that's a great principle. But how do we take that from Nane's life and plug it into the professional world? Let's get tactical. This slide really lays out how generosity becomes a strategy. Look at these actions: sharing credit, mentoring, connecting people. When you do these things, you position yourself not just as someone who does their job, but as a central hub. You stop hoarding information and instead you become a conduit. This builds so much social capital and it makes you a linchpin in your network. It's a strategic way to build influence by making everyone else around you better. I mean, these are Nane's own words, and they just perfectly capture this whole idea. It's a proactive mindset, right? You don't wait around to be asked for help. You actively look for chances to add value, to open doors for other people. That is how you build true, lasting influence. So let's bring all of this back to your chessboard, the one you're playing on right here, right now. I want you to really think about this for a second. This doesn't have to be some giant earth-shattering move. Maybe it's just publicly giving credit to a colleague in your next team meeting. Maybe it's offering to mentor a junior team member for 30 minutes. Or maybe it's just connecting two people in your network who you think could help each other out. What's your move going to be?
Because competence by itself just doesn't guarantee advancement. Quiet competence is a starting point, it's not a strategy. The only thing that changes your position on the board is a conscious decision to move. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.